Alright, YouTube, link in the description to the article in question. It's from Vice, so it's archived. By the way, use archive.is whenever you have to refer to a corporate media firm or a lefty firm. Always archive it first, deprive them of page views and so forth. Get the archived page of it and use that instead. People can read it, don't have to deal with, giving them money for publishing usually completely biased crap, let's face it. But it's on the topic of the mimetic occult war between sort of the followers, so they brand them, of Keck, sort of the 4chan mimetic mysticism side of the occult, the new wave of the occult, the more authentic side of the occult, and the witchy-poo crap ritualism of the dildo riders with their magical candles, trying to hex Donald Trump for partially unknown reasons. Should probably have this a little bit more centered, by the way. Anyway, I'd like to point something out to people. The occult, properly understood, is a fusion of spirituality and science, in all of its forms, human study, natural science, and so forth. If you look back at the more authentic traditions of the historical occult texts over time, if you look at alchemy or whatever, you find that it's 90% physical or philosophical science, human systems, geology, gemology, and botany, and things of that nature, and 10% spiritual overlapping. That's not to say that it's always a veil, that one is veiling the other. Oh, well, this alchemical text is essentially a spiritual guide. It's a sort of Christian mystic text that just refers to, like, distillation and stuff. Or the opposite, this is a chemical text. It's about primitive chemistry, and they just talk about the saints and the devil or something like that. It's not always the case. It can be. Some of the texts are definitely like that. You can identify them fairly easily when they're in that form. Otherwise, though, it's a fusion of the two. I'd like to point out something else that a lot of people don't seem to get. You look at the Third Reich, you look at Nazi Germany or something like that. There was a deliberate fusion of spirituality and science. Some of the more quickly rising empires that have ever existed were prefaced on the notion of taking spiritual materials and deriving the science from them, taking scientific materials and deriving spirituality from them, sort of this two-way crossover that happened. The very concept of the jet aircraft that were developed in the Second World War towards the end, that inform modern aeronautics completely, that make basically everything that we do now in the sky possible at large, is loosely based on the spiritual idea of the Vimana aircraft from 1,000-year-old Vedic texts and things like that. There was no flight at the time. It's just sort of a weird spiritual, almost metaphoric system, and yet you can derive science from that. Now, likewise, a lot of the sort of Cold War Christian mentality of the West, sort of the mysticism that stems from that, is prefaced on sort of, again, Vedic lore in some cases, but also Christian lore. Statements on sort of the devastating effects of atomic warfare and things of that nature. This crossover is not a bad thing. It doesn't render spirituality impure to contain elements of science, either pseudoscience, like science yet unexplained, or mainstream science. It doesn't taint science. This is the biggest problem I have with some modern academia. It doesn't taint your science to drag the spiritual in to make sweeping statements about humanity. It's about directing them properly so you're not causing undue harm to people and not being a shitfuck. Instead of committing genocide, why not try to improve the human lot or something along those lines? But the fusion of the two is important, and that's memetics. The internet needs its own spirituality too, and it already has it. It's called memetics. Things that are seen as coincidental, and Keck encapsulates this perfectly as an actual ancient Egyptian deity. We're not joking around when we say that Keck was considered real by people thousands of years ago. It was. It was part of their pantheon. Not a major deity. It wasn't like Ammon-Ra or something like that, but it was considered. It was venerated by smaller groups, sort of one of the more cultic figures as far as being actually literally worshipped. But it was considered to have powers, a personality. It was considered real. It's like the Necronomicon. And I spoke about this. I think it was the first occult video I did. The Necronomicon itself, the rituals it contains, are not taken from an ancient Sumerian text. but it's based upon actual ancient Sumerian words and figures, and concepts, philosophical concepts, in a generally westernized variant thereof. Therefore, it can be used as a ritual system if the person is of the right mentality to make use of it. The problem with the witchy poo side of the occult, here you have a mass manufactured ritual. It's very standardized. It's, oh, light the candle and say this chant, or twist around this rod and crap like that. It's a manufactured, extremely new wave, post-Victorian style, specifically westernized, Wiccanish ritual. It's not personalized. It's not capable of change. It's not randomized like memetics is. And it's not propaganda either. The other advantage of memetics, in the sense that it's practiced according to Vice by all of 4chan, I guess, instead of just being sort of one part shit posters and one part people that are becoming increasingly superstitious because of the nature of what they're actually dealing with. That's malleable. It's capable of changing, and it's also a form of propaganda. Because of the way in which the numerics behind Kek or Kekism operates, it's inevitably going to cause superstition among those that encounter it. If they encounter it long enough, and if they're not total hardliners against all forms of spirituality to begin with, they're going to eventually see the synchronicity that they're speaking of. That's the other part. The concept of occult synchronicity was spoken of quite some time ago. It's not like it just arrived in the last couple of years because people started spamming frog god material on an internet forum or something like that. That's not the way that it works. Synchronicity was already documented decades ago. The very concept of it is much older. Kek and memetics and things like that are simply a takeoff from that, an attempt to adapt it, to literally change the existential timeline of all humanity. Some people are doing this literally out of a sense of futility. They're like, this world is so screwed up, I kind of want another Holocaust. I kind of want the world to end. They want everything to end in fire. They want a revelation or a doomsday or something like that. They want the asteroid to come down. They're miserable. They don't care if they live or die. If they die, well, I'm dead. I'm going to die anyway. If I live, well, there go all of my problems in the world. I don't have to fucking deal with society telling me what to think, telling me what to do. I can go out and scav in the wasteland or something like that. That's what a lot of people increasingly want. It's all over the world, too. It's not just here. It's not just a bunch of people in their basements sipping Mountain Dew like it's often cast by groups like Vice. Oh, these neck-bearded 4chan trolls worshipping a frog god in order to prop up populism. That's completely and utterly wrong. There are people, they live otherwise normal lives. Inside of them festers an extremely deep and dark hate, and you don't even understand it. You don't understand. You don't see the problems with the world. You're sheltered from that. Some editor at Vice, living their upper middle class existence in their fucking white liberal gated community, doesn't know anything about the suffering of the average person in the world. They don't know what it's like to eat generic cereal, let alone to actually have to really suffer in any way. You have all these NEETs, people. They're not getting an education. You know, why bother? They just get into debt. They can't find a fucking job. They can't do anything else. Some of them do this by choice. I look down upon that. Some people, I feel sorry for. They're in that situation because they have no option. They can't find a fucking job or anything. They were promised that if they went to college, they'd be at least in the middle class right out of graduation. Oh yeah, you'll get you'll full 40K a year. You'll be fine. Maybe not rich, you know, but you'll have a little home and you'll have the wife and kids and stuff. They were promised all this. Now they're bitter. And I'm not surprised that they're bitter, honestly. I can better my lot through my own effort. Not everyone can do that. There are only so many things that can be exploited in the world for sort of the corporatistic gain that we have in Western economies anyway. They're turning to mysticism. It's not because they're faulty. It's not that there's something in a primordial sense wrong with them or their mentality. They're bitter because they want to be part of that normality and they just can't crack through it because of the way normality now works. So I'm not surprised that people are turning to superstition. I don't blame people that are in it. I'm in it too. Look at the things that I write. Look at the things that I talk about on a regular basis. Yes, I do believe in memetics in a more literal sense than most. It's not just people shitposting a frog god. You are invoking an actual entity from ancient times that was considered real by people at that moment in time. It's just like invoking some Renaissance era name of some demon or invoking Jesus Christ himself. When Christians go to church and they pray to Jesus Christ, they're not doing anything different from what somebody is when they're invoking some frog god on an internet forum. Now, this shows both the absurdity of mainline religions and perhaps the cloying aspects of their own mainstream movements, at the same time that it, in a way, shows the virtues of sort of the off-the-hook occultism of the internet era. It says both. When things overlap, when things interchange, that's a good thing within spirituality. It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing when science and spirituality combine together in some form. Of course, CAC is more the mathematics side of anything, that deals quite literally, in the literal sense, with probability and strings of repeating numbers and things like that. Well, what better entity could you possibly use to encapsulate certain sites on the internet? Reddit, I suppose, they would need an asexual and extremely liberal god or something like that. They're still searching for their deity. Theirs will be probably just a giant purple dragon dildo or something like that, honestly. Yeah, I'm sure their occultism will become very popular in certain urbanized locations in Western Europe. Sweden, which is shaped like a penis anyway, they'll be worshipping Reddit, the Reddit Lord, in no time, probably. As for the rest of us, who still have some sense of human nobility, who are bitter, because the world is fucked up and really shouldn't be. There's no reason for it to be, per se, because we may be apes, but we're intelligent apes. We should be able to work through these fucking problems. Yeah, some of us have begun praying for death, essentially. Like, I'll just end the world. Who fucking cares if there's a nuclear war? The survivors get to live in a cooler world, and those that are dead, well, they're dead. They're not suffering anymore, and it doesn't matter. Maybe they suffered while they were dying if they didn't get vaporized immediately. The rest of the world, now it's fallow. It's got wilderness. People can live out, their hopes and dreams, and they can sort of forget about the world, the hideous turd world we've created. Now, I don't necessarily agree with the more pessimistic aspects of that. I say there are plenty of opportunities to improve the world we already live in. But my goodness, yeah, there are people who are pretty fucking bitter. And I'm not surprised that they're embracing occultism, because occultism promises them at least the chance to change things. People have been, they've been practicing Christianity or Judaism or Islam or something for a very long time and never change anything. It makes things worse. It doesn't hold any promise. It's been attempted for a long time. It doesn't do anything. Take one look at the Pope. The Pope has begun embracing the same cultural Marxism that a lot of these people identify as the main problem of the world. Why on earth would they want to become Christians? Islam is part of that same problem they identify, part of the globalist problem. Don't even get me started on Judaism and what that entails for a lot of these people. Why would they embrace these paths? They're not going to. They're going to become a bunch of witches, a bunch of warlocks and things of that nature. They're going to practice sorcery. What kind doesn't even matter at this point. It's a good thing for the world. People get bitter, they get alienated. Mainline religions tend to decline. Offshoot religions, paganism of various forms, occultism in general, they tend to grow. It's happened before in the world. Maybe during the plague times, as society begins to collapse and people grow more and more disenfranchised by the religions they've been following, they start performing all sorts of weird rituals. They start painting pictures that, 100 years before would have gotten them beheaded or something. Oh, here are some skeletons dancing. Yeah, we're all going to die anyway. Let's go have sex in a graveyard. They start doing weird shit. And then, of course, society survives and enters the Renaissance, another deeply occult time. That occultism stayed with them for quite some time. And then all of a sudden things get better, and mankind starts talking about the Golden Age again, El Dorado and all of these things, and exploring, trying to find the fountain of youth. What a wonderful time it must have been compared to the Dark Ages that came not long before. It was because of occultism. People before that, why explore? Oh, we've got Christ right here. That's essentially what they devolved into, a bunch of vegetables. A bunch of ignorant, illiterate vegetables most people then couldn't even read. Although then again, you look at some of the posts people make online, seems like we have a similar problem right now, honestly, in some parts of the world. Certainly on Reddit, and especially on Tumblr. Jesus Christ. It'd be difficult to even formulate a way through it to understand what the fuck is being spoken about. That's about all. Peace out.